Welcome to Organizational Sherlocks, the podcast where business meets psychology and your organizational puzzles meet their match.
Join us for captivating stories and practical solutions to unravel your toughest challenges.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, your guides to a prescription for business success.
Let's dive in.
Well, hello, listeners. We're very excited to bring you on yet another guest. We've had a great string of guests in season 2, and that's all thanks to our connections as well as their outreach to us. And so today we're bringing to you Michelle. Michelle has a background where she has actually a book called Communicate with Courage, and we're so excited to get into it today. Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Gladieux. I am based out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, sort of the northeast corner of Indiana, about a 300,000 person town. And my team and I, we have a team of 8 at Gladieux Consulting. We sort of run around the US and also serve people here in the Midwest. And we offer 3 main services. We offer one-on-one executive and employee coaching. Love doing that, changing lives in a more individualistic way. And then we offer team training from teams of, 5 to last November, 1,500 came together to talk about communication skills. So, different presentation strategies and instructional design strategies needed there. And we also offer strategic planning with some process improvement, I guess 4 things. So we are all about how people can become more skilled as communicators, more courageous as communicators, so they can really make a positive splash in their organizations, as well as have more successful personal life communication.
Wow, that's really cool. I can't imagine sitting, maybe 1,500 people. That's wild. And that's so, it's so cool and empowering, I think, too, that so many people are interested in learning to communicate better. I am curious from you, Michelle, how this all got started. What sparked your interest, or what was it about communication that you thought that is where I want to focus a lot of my energy?
Well, as both of you have talked about in previous podcasts, I knew as a child that I wanted to help people, and the way that I wanted to help them was I wanted to help them get what they have to say out. And I think I've always been very intuitive and empathic and hopefully caring, about my fellow humans. So in high school, I became president of the business club. I went to Purdue University when I was pretty young, 17, and stayed there for bachelor's and master's, but met an academic counselor. I was telling him, I'm not sure what to major in here. I love psychology. I also love the study of business. And I don't think I want to be a clinical psychologist. Sound familiar? And he said, have you heard of industrial organizational psychology? And I had not. And I said, that sounds cool. What's that? And he said, that's the study of human behavior in the workplace. You could help people have more effective careers. And I'm thinking to myself, which means happier, more successful lives. So I'd say at 17, it was a done deal for me. It was IO psychology. And then when I graduated from Purdue, I started teaching industrial organizational psychology as a young adjunct professor when I was 23. Wow. That was a ways back now. I taught for about 20 years at 3 universities here in my home state of Indiana, different topics related to organizational psychology, business ethics, leadership, of course, right? Mm-hmm. And loved that feeling of designing coursework and original opportunities to be original and interesting and motivating and sometimes humorous in the way I presented the information, to try to honestly hook adult learners so they would want to look at themselves, love themselves, but still admit that we all have weaknesses as communicators that we can work on for our own benefit and others.
Yeah, that self-awareness is so important. I think that's one of the main topics we've been discussing this year so far, is that self-awareness is probably the most critical piece for someone to improve themselves. And unfortunately, that's what holds a lot of people back, is the lack of self-awareness. Or maybe they're internally self-aware, but externally they're not showing that. And so then they have a harder time developing that camaraderie with others. They're not communicating with courage. They're not sharing their deficits in a way. I have to say though, I think you figured out, you learned a lot more about IO psychology than the average individual that goes after IO in the end. Learning about it and knowing at 17 that's the direction for you. I can admit, I think it was maybe 19 or 20 for me when I learned that. I was in college at the time. But I think it's interesting, and that you had a mentor to actually guide you in the best way for you. Especially knowing that IO is ever developing and people still don't know about it these days.
I'm not going to share the age that I switched to IO.
Okay, you went through clinical psychology, so you're the cusp, Elizabeth.
You went through clinical
psychology process.
That's fair. That's fair.
So now you get to take a different approach to IO because of an expertise in clinical.
It's a different view for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely need the clinical psychologists that switch to IO so that they can do more of what you do.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I think that that like communication. So I mean, kind of on that point too, with the clinical and then switching and all of that, even though my toes are kind of still a little bit in both spaces, but communication is a huge part in both. And I think that's something that really stood out to me that you said, Michelle, is it's not just about how you communicate at work, right? Like what you're learning here and what they're learning through their work with you and your team also helps them at home. And I think sometimes we forget that it's not just this one area. Like it can have an impact in others. And so I'm gonna throw a question out there for you too. Like, how do you see that coming to be? Like what do you hear from clients typically about how it impacts other areas of their life?
Sure. We've worked with thousands of executive coaching clients, really employees at all level. And we always start with a personality assessment, a robust, valid, reliable, and forthright report about their strengths and weaknesses in many different constructs. And from there, I write goal plans for each client. And that's just a one-page Microsoft Word document with 4, 5, or 6 baby steps that they can take and practice at home and work so that they can expand their way of being in the world as a communicator. So I'm hearing from them, we've determined I need to work on my listening skills, Michelle. So I'm starting with trying to listen better to my significant other, to my ex, to my kids, at any age. And then they're more apt to practice it in the workplace, or their virtual meetings require that. Others are working on finding their voice and being more comfortable, believing that their opinion counts, that their question should be asked, that when they have praise, it shouldn't be kept within, it should be shared with others. So they practice at work, and then they'll tell me, I went to the restaurant and my dinner didn't arrive cooked, prepared correctly. And Michelle, for the first time in my life, I asked the server to come back and to correct the order so that it was what I ordered. And my family sat there with their mouths agape going, wow, mom or dad, or you've never done that. So, I mean, it's completely addictive. I struggle sometimes to turn off thinking about work and to go do something that takes me out of the role of a consultant and coach. But I couldn't ask for a better career. And it was 21 years ago that I decided I would leave the company I was working at as a corporate HR and training director and give it a go. And I had some friends that said, it's going to be great. This is so exciting. You'll get to work with all different types of companies instead of one company. And then I had friends that said, are you out of your mind? Like, you have a car allowance, quarterly bonuses, insurance. I haven't looked back, and now we get to serve people in almost every state, in government, in academia, manufacturing, banks, hospitals, mom and pops, nonprofits. And the cool thing is, whoever calls us, as you understand, we embed and get embedded in the organization and the team and get to know what's going well and what's not going as well, and help them move towards self-awareness, always with the message that, yes, we're going to look at some things you could do better, but self-love is very important. And you have to really accept that you're right where you're supposed to be on this twisted journey of life as a communicator. And I myself get very discouraged sometimes because I think, when, for example, will I learn to stop interrupting when I disagree? When will I have more emotional control, be less impulsive in conflict, perhaps? And it's just it's a factor of our DNA So our genetics really play into how we communicate, and then our life experiences, including upbringing. And that's what creates human personality. And so we are sometimes working against things we can't even change, such as genetics. And I think we need to be patient with ourselves while we try to become more skilled and courageous. So I really don't want to be known as the teacher or author who speaks only about courage and teaches only about courage, because the other huge half of it is work to get your skills up to snuff in presenting, in business writing, in the way you speak, in the way you listen, right? And a great way to do that is welcome feedback. Welcome it from BFFs. Welcome it from the people who love you. Welcome it from the people who don't love you. Welcome it from the people. I welcome it from strangers. If I'm going and doing a presentation for 1,000 people, you bet we make sure to get the feedback. What was good about this presentation? What part of it helped you most? What are your goals? What could have been better? So I'm reading, I think for the last 25 years or so, I've been reading what others think about my teaching and writing and speaking, and it has helped me get better. It has hurt my feelings sometimes, but you get over that.
It's better.
You
might. That's why it's really important to also take a breath after you get feedback and don't react and don't respond right away. And you can say, I just need a minute to digest that. And that's okay. Because I know, even from a personal perspective, I consider myself a more self-aware individual. I see where I have deficits. I ask for help when I need it. Even as a chief people officer, there's still times that I'm not an expert in a certain area. And so I want to go and I want to look into it more, and I ask for help. So I sometimes will struggle with getting feedback. So I'm like, well, I already know what I'm not good at. And then I'm like, let me take a breath, because they might see it from a different perspective than me. And then similarly, I helped a manager with a review recently, and I wanted to sit in because, we were having a little bit more difficulty with this individual, like on a personality basis, just more kind of, I guess, hot-headed in a way. And a big part of this discussion was being open to feedback so that you can grow in the way that you would like to, because if you don't take feedback, you're never going to grow. And I've heard leaps and bounds of a difference in the last week and a half about this person, and the new attitude and just the new level of energy and the happiness, because we talked about feedback as an important component of his life. We joked about, you listen to feedback from your wife. Why can't you listen to it from your manager, right? And so I think that is so important. Yes, the feedback point.
Good. I hope you're right there praising that individual about all of the behavior changes, small and large, that you're noticing, because as you know, that definitely incentivizes someone to continue to engage in the behavior you want to see more of. It's a great way to manage your boss as well.
Yeah, we actually had our manager complimented him, another individual complimented him, but then also reported back to me saying, hey, this person's doing really well. And then I let them know, hey, I've heard a lot of compliments about you recently. I'm like, that's really great to hear. Your attitude is shining through. And you're being looked at as a positive light for the organization right now. And that's just so important to say. Yes, that positive feedback like positive feedback versus negative feedback. We also have that option of, we're recognizing someone with positive feedback, saying you're doing a great job, but we also have the negative feedback of it's more of a constructive criticism, not necessarily a true criticism, but in the end it is. But I do want to point out two other things you said, just to really emphasize them. You talked about the nature versus nurture argument of personality and growth. And I love that you don't discount either side, because while there are theories that support this more of the nurture argument, saying that anyone can change, anyone can develop, there are also theories that saying that it is genetically based. So if you can work with both theories or a conjoined version of those theories, then you're better going to be able to reach those individuals and know, okay, there might be a weakness here, but how can we approach it in a different way on this side? On two different sides of the spectrum, right? So you talk about the nature versus nurture argument. I completely agree with you there, because I think it's important to look at both sides of the argument, take into account both sides of those theories. And then lastly, you noted the term, you need to embed yourself in the organization, in the team, and that's what you guys do. I can't thank you enough for saying that, because too often consultants take a step back and say, oh, I'm an expert. Don't tell me what to do. I'll review from what I need to. And then they don't understand the company. They don't understand the true working environment, the true culture, because there are situational factors to how people react and behave. And so that communication will change based off of who the manager is, who their team members are, what the culture of the organization is. So if you can connect the communication capabilities of the person with that of their situation and surrounding environment, because you've embedded yourself into the organization and team, you'll be better able to develop those interventions and make the changes that the company and you feel need to happen.
Yes, last night I was working on writing a workbook about lifelong change wellness for our Allen County Public Library system, and I'll be teaching there in mid-March. And so needs analysis is important, regardless of whether you're presenting to one person or teaching one person or mentoring one person or many. And the first thing I did when I accepted the teaching assignment was to ask, please tell me, can you write me half a page or a page about some of the changes coming down the line that will affect the library employees? So as I was creating the instruction last night, I'm thinking, what would it be like to have a new administration running federal government and not being sure where the cuts will be? What would it be like if I knew my workspace was changing? We're now going to have a different interdepartmental library loan system. Software is changing, etc. So I spent some time trying to think like a librarian and like the staffers at the library, and then even the words we choose, the layout, the reading level of the materials, the amount of materials we present, will factor into the audience analysis. So hot tip, everybody, whomever you're speaking to, we're all more likely to think that they think the way we do, or they have a similar personality. It was decades before I figured out, oh, not everyone in the world is a driver expressive, or if you're a disc person, that would be dominance influence. Those are my two main strengths. And I really thought the rest of like the 8 billion people on the planet were made the same way.
Right.
And then I hired people who were amiable and analytical, right? And I started realizing, whoa, like I'm going to have to slow my roll when interacting with these people. I need to give them time to ponder. I need to even point out what might go wrong, which is difficult for an optimist. But dealing with personalities that can sometimes be more pessimistic, it's smart to use that similar to me, knowledge of the similar to me effect, and not to put on airs or be someone you're not, but just know that masterful communicators can communicate effectively with anyone else, as long as you're doing some audience analysis. And another tip I would have would be state your intention. So when I get in front of the library staff, I'll be saying, I understand you have the following changes possibly coming to you, and you want to lead your teams more effectively through them. So this is what I've learned. Tell me a little bit more about how you feel about that before I open my mouth to teach my theories about change management, right?
Communication versus comprehension. I know I've noted that in the past. And then I will say, like, we definitely have that communication versus comprehension approach at our environment. And we're constantly, coaching leaders how to change their communication a little bit to help with the comprehension on the opposite side, with their team that they're overlooking. But then we're kind of getting to a new level of teaching the team to also understand that communication comprehension change and try to understand people's communication styles so that they might be able to comprehend them better. And so it works both ways. There's an ebb and flow. But definitely when you're first introduced to a group of individuals, really understanding their comprehension style, aka the communication style in the end. I call it the comprehension because they're not necessarily communicating anything at the moment, then what you want to teach will be more easily absorbed by that group of individuals.
Well said. And that's in my book, I write a lot about pro moves. And I got that terminology from my fantasy football team, which for a decade has been called pro moves, and it never wins. I never win, but that's okay. Because when I was writing the book, I thought, you know what these are? These are communication strategies, techniques, and skills that the average bear walks on by, doesn't notice that opportunity, and it might be a few seconds of your time is all it would take. And when you think about all of the opportunities that are missed throughout our days and evenings, and what we could achieve as communicators if we just put a little more emphasis on figuring out the way to understand and empathize with others, stick up for ourselves and others when we need to, listen when it's hard. And I tried to make sure that the book was packed with these pro moves that anybody in any industry, any type of job could go try. And of course, they relate back to my study and research in organizational psychology. But I would say, filling it with personal stories that are about real people was important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think showing the realistic aspect of it. And then, listening when it's hard, communicating when it's hard. Well, there's the courage interplaying. So tell me a little bit about.
Sorry, this is me using my dominance part of it. I want to jump in because I don't want to move past. So communication, I'll tell you something about me. I'll be vulnerable for a second. Something about me is I wait until the right moment a lot of the time. And then a lot of the time that moment passes and I don't jump in. So that's something that I'm working on for all of our listeners to realize, or to know. I just want to say one thing though, because I think what you're saying is so important, and I don't want us to lose it, or for it to get bypassed a little bit, is kind of the idea of your audience and understanding who your audience is and what your intention is. I just had this conversation with my students the other day about it. Like, it doesn't make you disingenuous to change your communication style to meet the needs of your audience. Because, there were some concerns about that. Well, then that's not me. I'm not bringing myself authentically. And I said, and if you ask yourself the question before you jump in, what do I need to land? What needs to be heard? What needs to be comprehended out of this? Then you're going to make a strategic decision about how you want to communicate those things. And so I just think that's so important. And I think that's a part I wish I would have, or a lesson I wish I would have learned earlier on in life. And so I'm happy that you said that, Michelle, because that is so vital to me. We were talking about, if you're talking to a legislator versus if you're talking to the insurance company or you're talking to a client, that's all going to sound a little bit different, both in your writing, but also in the way that you speak, right? And then the other thing that was really interesting that we were talking about, and it kind of aligns with what you were saying too, is just that we have to help people how do I say this? The self-awareness part of it. I'm going to bring it back to that really quick, because that was another moment where I didn't jump in quick enough and we moved on to the next part. But
sorry, that's probably my
that's okay. Self-awareness is hard, and it's scary for a lot of people to face those things. And when I've worked with clients in coaching engagements or whatever it might be, who've said, I don't believe that this is true about me. This is, whether it's from a 360 feedback or it's from a personality assessment or whatever it is, this isn't true. This is not how I am. And I always ask them, I say, go to somebody you trust really well and have them read it and give you their perception. You're not asking them for direct feedback. You're very abrasive, you're saying, is this true about me? And it makes it, I think, a little bit easier to start building that self-awareness and breaking down that fear. So those are my 2 points. Sorry to bring us back a while ago.
You're good, because it makes me think on the other side of you said your students feel that if they change their communication style, they're not being authentic to themselves. And Michelle, I have a question for you, because I think it's actually courageous to change your communication style to ensure that what you're trying to get across gets across correctly. This can apply from anywhere from a leader all the way to a salesperson, truly. So Michelle, how would you respond to Elizabeth's students if they're saying, I don't feel like I'm going to be authentic to myself if I communicate in a different manner?
I don't think there's any way to show up and to communicate and not be authentic to yourself, as long as you're using some time-tested best practices so that your presentation does land in the most important places where you need it to land. Mm-hmm. So I'm not asking anyone to change their beliefs or their spirituality or what makes them uniquely them. I'm asking them to make sure that they polish the way that they send and receive messages so that more people do gain the comprehension. Right. And I did put not a whole chapter, but there are several pages about public speaking tips, and I think they could apply to anyone and still allow them to be their authentic selves in the book. Absolutely. And I'd love for people to check that out, because I've seen them work with 18-year-olds that are doing their first speech, and I've seen it work for retirees who are coming back in the workforce as volunteers, people at the C-suite, every level, we all need to understand some of the basics of making sure that when we speak, people listen, and that we speak in ways that are memorable and that aid comprehension. So we're not trying to change who you are. In fact, we absolutely need your authentic self and your beautiful, unique soul engaged in the communication. And I always counsel presenters to make sure that they keep a spice file, I call it, which could be physical. Mine's physical. I suppose I have thousands of things electronically too, but in the spice file, you're putting things that move you or are meaningful to you. Could be a cartoon, could be a quote, could be a letter from a friend, and then, or pictures. And then as you begin to speak more, as your career grows, then you can go back to the spice file and remember what moves you and find a way to bring your authentic self into the presentation by tying anything you'd like about yourself into the topic, as long as it's done professionally, and with an eye on good use of time.
Yeah.
So those are some things about bring yourself to the presentation, and we're all more interested.
Yeah.
You don't have to turn into a robot, but you do need to learn how to modulate your voice tone and volume and pacing, and get rid of the ums, and speak so that you are audible and articulate, and use eye contact, even though it's sometimes scary, and have effective use of mannerisms, etc. And it pays off dividends that we can't even begin to guess at what they will be. The gifts are always there, and they are unknowable until you start working on how you communicate and step up with some courage.
And I think
you know what? I was going to say, if it doesn't go well, and there's always something about every one of my presentations I would change as I drive or fly away from the presentation. I'm like, oh, forgot to say this, or shoot, I would have liked to share this resource, or I don't think I answered that question completely. Take it in, let it make you better. And I find that now, even where I have messed up as a communicator or as a presenter in any way, as a family member who's having an argument with a loved one, I appreciate all my mess ups and failures so much now, because when someone's coming to me and sharing something hard that happened with them or a mistake they've made, I'm so grateful I can say, I know something of how you feel. I've had a similar experience, which helps me get them past that obstacle.
And I wouldn't say that you necessarily had a failure in your communication or your understanding of someone else's communication. I think that you're more so just constantly growing and learning. Your mind's always making new connections, and it might not have been able to make it at that point in time. And that means we just get to approach it better for the next time. It doesn't mean we did something wrong necessarily. It just means we could have done something better. And I do that as well. I'm like, oh, I could have said this a little better. Oh, I should have done this a little bit better. Each time I actually make a presentation, I reuse them. A lot of times I bring up my professionalism one a lot, because it's connecting the personal with the career in a professional way. It's more of a holistic wellness type of professionalism. And I'm constantly editing the PowerPoint. I'm constantly editing the presentation. I'm changing what I want to say. I'm sometimes changing the quotes based off of the group I'm talking with. I love motivational quotes. I'm sure anyone that's on my LinkedIn can notice that. I constantly have some sort of motivational quote near me or on me. And that those are the things that you pull from your spice file, right? Is just connecting, oh, I love this quote. It's really good for this group, versus I love this quote and this one's good for this group. But like I said, you're not failing. It's just that sometimes we can communicate better. And that's part of the courage behind communication, is knowing that there are deficits to some of how we've communicated in the past.
Well said. Two quick courage stories from yesterday.
Yeah.
A CEO in a medical practice with good intentions, who has run some people over in their communication, disregarded their opinion, not making friends that way. And in that goal plan, I asked the individual to consider who is deserving of an apology. And in our next session, we will sit down and we'll get together and get those apologies written. Another is working with a group for my first time, the Indiana Youth Government Program. And this is 6th graders through 12th graders who this weekend will be presenting bills on the State House in Indianapolis.
Wow.
And you can imagine, 6th through 12th graders haven't had a lot of experience presenting, and this is a very high pressure atmosphere, and they're all very nervous. And one of the youngest gals that came to my presentation at the YMCA in the evening was introducing herself to me because I wanted to hear each of them speak. And I said, just tell me your name and what your bill that you're presenting is about, and then something you like to do that isn't school and isn't trying to get a bill passed that they've been working on for 6 months. And she said, talked to me a little bit about herself and said, and I'm not a good public speaker. And I said, you did very well with everything you put together there. I'd like you just to say that last sentence again and put the word yet at the end of it.
Right.
She grinned and said, and I'm not a good public speaker yet. I said, you will be, and you remember this. So I would like to encourage people to spend some time imagining a positive, powerful future where their communication skills have improved because they were willing to meet themselves where they are, love themselves, accept the weaknesses, get feedback, and practice, right? And I hope my book can help with that. It was written with a lot of love. And as I said, real life stories. At the end of each chapter, one exercise that anyone could do any day that doesn't take a lot of time, and then one pro move. And the thrill is seeing folks try and then realize that went better than I thought it could have gone often, because they have spent some time visualizing possible positive outcomes. So each one of those students spent some time visualizing possible positive outcomes of their bill getting into committee and perhaps being made into law. Mm-hmm. And the CEO, who has some apologies to make, that individual coaching client is spending time visualizing the forgiveness that comes from an honest mistake and the honest mistakes that they've made.
Yeah.
Too often, what our minds want to do is direct us towards what could go wrong. And that's when we start to tell ourselves, she's not going to listen, so I'm not going to try. He's not going to care because he's never acted like he cares, so I'm not going to say anything. They're not going to change, so I don't give my company any ideas for improvement. And that's in the 4 hidden challenges I write about in the book. That one is called Rationalizing the Negative. And I suppose I can tell because I'm getting kind of worked up over here. That is a pet peeve of mine. And I would like, and I do it too. Of course, I couldn't write about these 4 hidden challenges if they didn't plague me sometimes. Yeah. But that's something we need to uncover and bring it out of peripheral vision right in front of us and ask ourselves, what am I thinking about this? How am I defeating myself before I start?
Oh, we
can put out our behavior.
Yeah, that's such a powerful question. And I feel like it can be so deep too, you know. You go really deep about how you're defeating yourself before you even start. I just think that's so powerful.
Yeah,
let's be
understood. What to compare that to right now, because it is such a great question, and I do think of, the people that they wait till the last minute to their project because they think they're going to fail anyway, and so they wait till the last minute and they procrastinate it. There is a term for this, Elizabeth. I am totally blanking on it. It is a psychological term, but I cannot remember it right now. So maybe I'm gonna have to post that once I can find the term, because it's not on the tip of my tongue right now. It's somewhere back here in the deep pocket of my brain.
That's happened to me a lot recently.
Let's give ourselves and others some grace too, because a lot of these things that hold us back, these hidden challenges that hold us back as communicators, they are formed in our youth, and sometimes before we're even conscious of forming them. And here's my psych degree talking, right? We have to think about our age, especially ages like 2 years old to 10 years old, when we were small and the people around us were tall and we were taking it all in and developing our coping mechanisms to get through life. It might be worth realizing that some of those we can kick to the curb and they're not needed anymore. And also some of the negative messages we got about ourselves.
Right.
Many of us did not grow up with role models as parents or the love and attention that we deserved. Mm-hmm. And so now we are tasked with giving that to ourselves, at the same time debating those voices in our head that tell us we're not a good person. And when I ask a coaching client, why, I didn't advocate for myself in that performance review. Why? Because I don't think they would listen or care. Why don't you think that? It eventually comes around to, because I wasn't cared for in that way growing up often. And I am not the clinical psychologist, but I do know that we sometimes have to look back to move forward.
Absolutely.
So consider what you've been through. We've all been through hard things in life, and decide what you want to keep this year and what you want to kick to the curb, so that you are more in charge of your mind than your mind is in charge of you. Hard stuff But if you want to get great as a communicator, and every human being has the potential to be great as a communicator, sometimes we have to look back a little bit and give our younger selves some love, or work with a counselor on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is very much, Michelle, I'm seeing some future collaboration, I'm telling you right now, because the book that I'm writing is all about the cages we build, right? Like the cages that are built are the cages that hold us, and not directly related to communication, but I think it's a component of it for sure. So we'll have to, when that book is finally published, we will have to talk about it, because I do see a lot of overlap. You're speaking my language right now. So
beautiful. What city are you in?
I am in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So,
do you know what a quick flight that is from Fort Wayne?
Hey, I'll come down to Indiana
or
too.
to Fort Wayne. Just saying.
Oh my gosh, I'll come down for sure. Yeah, no, I mean
maybe I'll come visit too. Hey, don't discount me.
Okay, fine.
Make sure I'm away, but I can make it, I promise.
Morgan, you can come too. Just kidding. Or maybe we'll have to come see you. I don't know. I could go for some East Coast seafood, so that could work too.
Yeah. Definitely should come in the summertime then. Lobster rolls around Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. You cannot beat those.
Don't tease me. Come on. It sounds so good.
My favorite lobster roll place on Lake Winnipesaukee this summer, if you can fly over. You too, Michelle.
Okay, let's spend some time visualizing the possible outcome of 3 of us teaching together, or something like that.
Oh my goodness, that would be amazing.
Yes,
that would be amazing.
Oh,
well, we're doing that now, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And our listeners are getting, are hopefully comprehending it well.
I'm sure they are.
Absolutely. I would encourage anyone though, truly, to grab this book. I think the message that you're sending is it's digestible, it's understandable, right? Like it's not something that's so, like sometimes you grab a book and you're like, this is a little bit over my head, or I don't really know how I would put that into action. And I think to me, that's the cool thing about what you're describing, is these are things that will be so impactful and helpful, and you present them in a way that is so easily understood and digestible. And it's just really about what intentional action are you taking to get to make change, right? And to become a better communicator, and to do that with courage. And I think that is just such a cool thing. And I thank you for spending the time writing a book, because I know how long that takes to do, like the energy as well. And so thank you for doing that and bringing that to our world where we desperately need it.
Yeah, it is really important to know it's for the average person. It's for the everyday average person, whether you're a reader or not, whether you're self-improving or not. It's going to push you to want to go through some self-improvement.
Oh, I love that. I think my day is made. I just want to add that it's about baby steps for all of us. And it's often 2 steps forward, 2 baby steps forward, 1 big step back. And that's part of the secret of life, right? You just keep getting up.
Yeah.
And you can state your intention, by the way. Like I've had to say to my family, where I'm probably least skilled as a communicator. I work hard all day to be a role model communicator. And then you know how that is. At the end of the day, sometimes the family gets the short end of that stick. I've told them, hey, my intention is to listen better, even when I disagree. You have to announce your goals. Another pro move, announce your goals as a communicator to people so they can hold you accountable. And also so you can break them out of the stereotype they have you in their mind. They'll have you figured out. And they're going to probably want to keep you in that box if you don't announce how you are changing in your life, or trying to change, and announce it humbly. You're not going to say, oh, well, hey, I didn't speak up in meetings before, but now I'm going to be the best public speaker we've got. You know, just say, I want you to know I'm going to be speaking up more in these meetings because I'm working on being more confident as a communicator. So I hope you'll all hold me accountable. And then you have people celebrating your wins with you and letting you know how you're doing.
Exactly. It opens up feedback loop. Like it opens it up, right? It doesn't make it so forced. It just becomes, I think, a natural part of the conversation. I'll also argue, like I can see this in business, absolutely, right? I can see all of this, like the communication pieces happening in business and all the things you're describing. And I can see it at home, but I can even see it like my 2 little kids. You know, that what you're describing is something we talk about a lot. Like I'll make a commitment to them. Like, okay, I will wait to respond until you've finished your story, you know, within reason. My kids are very verbose. They really like to talk. So there's that. But like there are times where my 9-year-old will say, you know, Mom, you promised that you were going to listen. Okay. Like, all right, you're right. I did. And it's like being checked by a 9-year-old is not exactly fun, but at the same time, he's right. But that's teaching him a life skill for the future.
He's already communicating with courage at 9 years old. And that's thanks to how his parents have raised him. So obviously he has a very safe household, which is amazing. And hopefully they're not going to deal with these issues where they're going. I mean, obviously they're always going to go through self-improvement. Everyone's always going to be going through self-improvement because continuous learning, lifelong learning is extremely important. But he's going to be a step above the rest, thanks to you and your husband.
We also talk a lot. That probably helps. Anyway, just kidding.
You missed the joke earlier because you said that your children were very verbose, and I said they get it from your mom.
They do.
I picture him at 35 years old in a relationship, romantic relationship, and not being heard fully and saying politely and lovingly with empathy, I don't really think you're listening. Can you please listen? You know, and because he wasn't punished for saying it at 9. Good for you.
Yeah. So there's applications, again, just an illustration of how it can be applied in many different areas. That's so cool. That's so neat. I think we need to have you, Michelle, on for a part 2. I'm in. I don't know what you all. Okay.
I feel like, Michelle, you're going to fall back in. Maybe we can do some sort of case study, case analysis with you to get your brain in action in that part 2. But before we log off, obviously, here at Organizational Sherlocks, we have the name Sherlocks for a reason, and that's because we're a bunch of curious cats. And Michelle, you've said curiosity is a key element of courageous communication. Why do you think people often underestimate that curiosity within communication?
I think people have perhaps not had the outcomes that they hoped for when they have used their curiosity. They maybe weren't encouraged to go a little deeper or to do the research, or weren't rewarded for their efforts. But I want to remind everybody that curiosity and learning is its own reward. So if you are thinking, you know, I just feel like something's off with this coworker. I said good morning and they said, Now they might have just said, and looked down at their coffee because they're coming off of an argument with their spouse that morning, or who knows what. But how about having the courage and the curiosity to turn around and say, hey, just check in. Is everything cool? I've sensed some weirdness with us, and I really value our teamwork. And, you know, when I do this, I'd say it goes well about half the time. And that's okay, because I'm going to have so many more wins for staying curious and being willing to get to the bottom of what's going on with communication, always with the audience analysis, making sure that we're not creating obstacles for our relationship building with others, but caring enough. I mean, do you see all the people who aren't curious and who aren't trying? And think about yourself in the small ways that you can. I'd like to encourage our listeners and viewers, check out our website, especially during the pandemic. We spent month after month after month, we were missing audiences that we could have been teaching in person. So we were writing and creating wonderful, helpful, downloadable, e-fillable, free tools. They're all on the website at GladioConsulting.com, and I'm hoping you'll have a little connection link to that because it's a tough last name.
Yes, we will definitely be sharing your link. I actually have a couple other potential posts we'll be doing to get
great.
highlights, really important points from today.
As you guys might know from one of my mugs here, I really love Tom Petty.
Oh, me too.
So our newsletter I write quarterly is called Breakdown. And it's always filled with links to the latest research, or perhaps like a unique mission exercise or team coaching ideas. We just try to put a lot out there. And I always include a music video, and folks can sign up for Breakdown at GladioConsulting.com. We'd be honored. Yeah. Never any cost. Yeah. We just know that some organizations don't invest in their people the way they wish they could, or I could say the way they should.
Right.
We want to make sure that there's resources out there for people listening today.
Yes, that's great. And I think even if our listeners, even if you're not going to be working with Michelle directly, I definitely recommend signing up for that newsletter, because the micro learning you're going to get from taking a look at the latest and greatest from her and her team, that's going to keep you motivated and reconnecting with your values on how to motivate your team to communicate with courage. And maybe it will result in you working with Michelle and her team eventually.
Love it.
And you never know when something's going to land and mean something so impactful in your life. So take a chance, be courageous, right?
Right.
Well, thank you, Michelle. We appreciate you so much coming on and joining us. As we mentioned, we'd love to have you back for a part 2 to dive deeper and maybe even get into a case study of sorts. So we will let our listeners know. It seems like, Michelle, I'm getting a head nod that you're in for that.
Yes.
Perfect. So our listeners, come back. Make sure you kind of keep following, because Michelle will be joining us back here in the future. So thank you again.
Yes, my pleasure. Keep up the good work, ladies. I know you're volunteering to do this, and it's an amazing service to the world. So I hope that your listenership continues to expand.
Yes,
thank you.
We do as well. So thank you.
Great. Well, listeners, this concludes another intriguing episode of Organizational Sherlocks. I'm Elizabeth Fleming.
And I'm Morgan Ashworth, reminding you that the journey to success is an ongoing investigation.
Always stay curious, stay strategic, and keep utilizing insights to decode your business mysteries.
Join us every Tuesday for your next Whodunit. This is Organizational Sherlocks, closing today's case.
We will see you all next time.